Hey guys, what's up? Fuller here, and welcome back to the channel where we talk about Metasounds, game audio, and programming. And in today's video, I'm going to give you a little bit of a deep dive into how to create a basic aux reverb send-up inside the Unreal Engine using submixes. It's not terribly difficult, but you know, there's a few steps to it. And in my walkthrough demo, I created a multi-track Metasound that had 4 different tracks, drums, bass, and 2 synth parts that I put together just to demo this project. And then we were using each of those instruments to basically direct a submix send into a reverb master and a delay master. However, in this video, I'm going to just use one track because basically I'm going to show you how to set it up for one Metasound, and then you can scale that up to as many Metasounds as you want. If I showed you how I did the entire thing, it would take hours, and what we're really trying to teach here is just concepts that you can apply and scale as small or as big as you want. So here's what the level looks like. We have our Manny walking around. Over here we have a reverb send knob, and then over here we have a delay send knob. When you click on this instrument, I only have one in here, but before I had a bunch of different instruments. We're just going to do one in here. You see I have this visualizer, it's responding to the Metasound. We'll look at that in a minute. Click on this, and then I'll click on this, and I can use the M and the N to send the reverb, so you'll hear it get wetter and wetter as I move the value up. That's full reverb. And the same with the delay here. It's just kind of like a quick 8th note slap delay. Here's reverb and delay. Okay, and then I also set up a UMG version over here, so when we click the M, we'll get the UMG version here. And over here mutes it. So that mutes the lead, and then this sends it to the verb. Full volume here, full verb here, and then I can mute it. And you can still hear the reverb tail, which is cool. And that's it. You see when the synth track is muted, the visualizer's not working. Cool. Alright, so that's kind of how it works. Let's just dive in. So let's talk about the concept really quick. The concept is pretty simple. We have a Metasound that is assigned to a submix effect send. In this case will be the verb and the delay. And then we are basically just feeding that Metasound different levels into that submix, and then that creates the wet sound. So let's start by looking at the Metasound. So I have 2 Metasounds in this. I have the track, which is this. So that's just my rhythm track that I put together. And then I have the lead Metasound, which is what we're going to be feeding, and that looks like this. So I have a trigger repeat that's playing a wave asset, and inside this wave asset I have 3 versions. This one, that's one, and then I have this one. I basically just did 3 takes. I did 3 solos. And then so every 8 bars you get a new solo, and it randomly picks it. And so the wave plays that, and then over here we have an envelope follower set up, and this is for the visualizer, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then I have a volume float here that controls the volume. And notice I have the envelope follower for the visualizer coming out after the mixer because I want the visualizer to shut off when it's not getting any volume. So that's all there is to the Metasound. If you aren't sure how to set up a Metasound, go check out my videos on the Metasound basics, but that's just how the Metasound is set up. Now let's look at the 2 effect sends. So I have a submix verb I'll double click on that, and it's basically, it's a submix, which is defaulting out to the main submix, right? So this submix is going to the main submix. And then I have a submix effects chain here, and this is the master reverb effect preset. Now I haven't done anything to this. This is just the standard master reverb effects preset, and we can go look at it right here if we want to open it. And it's super simple. Here are the settings. You can adjust these settings if you want to create different, different levels of reverb. That's up to you. And actually, you can play around with that. I didn't really play around with that for this video because I just want to show you how to set it up. Then if we go back to our main content, we have a submix delay. So same exact thing, except this one's going to the delay sound effects submix, which I created. This is a delay length of 270, which I did some math. That comes out to be approximately an eighth note at 111, because 111 is the BPM for this track. So, and it's just a real simple delay, nothing fancy. So I set up those two submixes, and then what you can do is you can come over here and we go to our Metasound. So let's look at our lead Metasound. Then we go over to source, and this is how you assign this Metasound to be able to send to that submix. So the way a submix works is just like an auxiliary bus on a mixer. You have a submix with a reverb on it, and anything you send through that is going to create reverb, and then that's going to get blended with the main output. So the amount of signal that you send to it is the amount of reverb that you get back from it. So the way you do that is you open your Metasound, you go to source, you go down here under submix. This enable bass submix, what that does is that sends the sound to the main output. So if that's not selected, you're not going to hear anything right now. But we're sending it to the bass sound mix because that's the dry signal. Then we have here enable submix sends, and then under here you see I have two. I added two to this array. So I've got the first one, which is SM verb. That is the submix we just created. And you'll see here manual send level 0. So right now this is not getting anything. So if I play this, you hear none. But if I move this up, you'll hear it gradually send to the reverb. Okay? You don't really want to exceed 1 because that's a scalar parameter. So it's 0 to 1. Then I also have this one going to the delay. So this is to the delay. And again, you'll hear nothing until I start bringing this up. Cool, huh? So that's how we send our Metasound to the actual submix. That's pretty simple. But now what we're going to focus on is how do we do that in real time in the engine. So basically, this is where the blueprinting comes in. Metasounds is one small aspect, but you really need to learn blueprinting to unlock the power of the Metasound. So we're going to close out this Metasound and the submixes because we don't need those anymore. And we're going to go look at how I'm doing this in the blueprint. So there's a couple ways to do this. And this is how I just decided to do it. You can use you can use the UMG widget, and that's one way to do it. But I like to kind of create it in 3D space. So here's what I did. So I imported both Metasounds to the level. So as soon as I hit play, both Metasounds are playing. So we got the track playing, and then we got the lead track playing on a separate track in perfect sync. So what I did here is when I originally set this up, I had drums, bass, synth, and lead. And what happened is every time you click on one of the instruments, this thing that says selected, that shows you what is selected. So I had drums over here, so when I clicked on that, it selected drums. And the way I did this is pretty simple. So because here's the thing, so I have two knobs, right? I have two knobs. I have the value of the reverb and I have the send of the delay, but I wanted them to be able to jump to different Metasounds. So I wanted to be able to click this and go, okay, so now we're on the lead. Now when I change this fader, I want it to affect the send of just that instrument. Or if I clicked on drums, I wanted it to control the drums. So how did I do that? So the way I did that is I set up a blueprint for the knob, which is, we'll go look at this. So here's the knob blueprint, basically just this knob, that's all, and it's rotating around. But when it rotates, here's what's going to happen. So when we click on it, it enables the input, which is allowing us right now to use the letter M and N to spin the knob left or right. So we rotate the knob, we're basing it on a timeline, and then that timeline's shooting out this float from 0 to 300 degrees, basically. And so what that's doing is that's spinning the knob. And then we're clamping that 0 to 300, we're clamping that to 0 to 1. And so what that's allowing us to do, it's allowing to basically, when the knob's at nothing, it's at 0. When it's full circle, it's at 1. So we have a scale of 0 to 1, which is what we want for our reverb and our delay send. Then what we're doing is we're sending out this event dispatcher, send data. We're sending that out 0 to 1. So whenever that knob moves, that 0 to 1 parameter is going to be sent via event dispatcher back to the blueprint when we bind that. Then we're also setting the text. So this text right here gets updated whatever that value is. And that's how when we spin it, this is the text render that's getting updated. So we always see, so that's the level of the send. So that's how that works. Now, how do we get it into the blueprint? Let's come back here. On begin play, and this is in our level blueprint. On begin play, we are enabling the input of the player controller. We're setting to enable mouse clicks and to show the cursor, so we can see where the cursor is at all times. Then we're getting the all actors class of the knob. So any knob that's in the world, which is this one and this one. We have two knobs set up. However, if you notice in the knob blueprint, I created this instance editable variable that can be named. So when I put this in the world, I can call this one down here as delay, and down here is verb. And that comes in handy because this event dispatcher, it also sends the name. So when I click on verb, that event sends the name too, so it lets Unreal know, hey, I clicked on the reverb, or hey, I clicked on delay, whatever you call it. So now when we bind this event, we're binding this event to send data. So now what? Anytime this knob moves, it's sending us this information. If you go check out my video on event dispatchers, I talk a little bit more in depth how that works. And we got this delegate here. And what this is, event from fader sets and updates variable names and amount. So now anytime I click on a knob and then move it with the M and the N key, it's going to trigger this event. And this event's going to set the amount of the event, which is being sent from the knob over here, which will be 0 to 1. So it's creating this variable here, setting this variable, and then it's also setting this name from event. So now what we're able to do is we're able to get the name and the amount into our level blueprint. That allows us to decide whether it's a reverb or a delay. So then we come over here, then we're also going to set 3 other variables. Is delay, is reverb, is volume. So these are just some Booleans that I set up, because I also had a volume knob in there, but for simplicity I took the volume knob out for this. So now, as soon as that event's triggered, we're going to check to see, is it delay? Meaning, is the name sent here delay? So did I click on the delay, or did I click on the reverb, or did I click on volume? So if I did click on the delay, then this delay becomes true. So now the blueprint knows it's delay. If it's a reverb, then the blueprint knows it's reverb. It can only be one of those 3. It can't be all 3 of them. It has to be one. So we set to delay, reverb, or is volume. Then once that is set, we can come over here and we can start branching out the logic. So if you look over here, when I click on this synthesizer, it actually flip-flops, and what it does is when I click on it, it sets this text up here to lead. So when I click on it, it sets it to lead, and the lead is on. Now that's handy when I have other instruments. I had drums, bass, but in this one I just have lead. So what it does is when I click on that, it sets this Boolean here, is lead. So when I click on that, is lead becomes true. So now with all this information, I click on the lead, so lead is true, and then I click on the knob. It's either a delay or a reverb. So now my blueprint knows it's lead and it's reverb, or it's lead and it's the delay. And with that information, I can start doing feeding the submix parameters. So over here, when the knob moves, we branch off into this Boolean condition logic. So this one sets reverb. So it asks the question, is the knob that I pressed a reverb? And if it is, it's going to come out true. Then it's going to ask, well, is the instrument that I touched the lead? Yes. So if both those things are true, it's the lead instrument and it's reverb, then we'll come out here and we will set this submix. This is the submix we created here, the submix verb. You can see right here, that's the submix verb we created. So now, when that fader moves and it's a reverb and the lead instrument has been selected, it's going to set this submix send for this Metasound. What Metasound? This one, MS lead. This is telling it, set the submix send to the reverb on this Metasound. How much? This amount. What amount? The amount from the event. Remember, this is the variable that we set up, amount from the event. What event are we talking about? The knob moving. So anywhere between 0 to 1, it's going to update this. So as the knob moves up, every time that number changes, this event happens, and it keeps updating it until you get all the way to 1, then you're maxed out. Well, if it's not reverb, and it goes, oh no, I pressed delay, okay, then we're going to go out false, because is reverb? No, so it doesn't do any of this. It comes out here, and it goes, okay, if it's not reverb, is it delay? Why, yes, it is. Okay, so now delay is true. Is it lead? Because remember, before I had drums in there and stuff. Oh, is it lead? Now, in my other blueprint, and that's the reason I simplified this, is because you would have 4 of these for each Boolean. So it would be delay, but then it go, is it lead? Is it drums? Is it bass? And then it would branch off. So it just got real big, and that would have been a really long video. So this is lead, this is delay. So now we do all the submix stuff, except now we come out here and we set the submix in for the delay submix. And which Metasound? The lead Metasound, which is that synth solo. And how much? Amount from the event. And then if it's not reverb and it's not delay, is it volume? Now I removed the volume one. I'll show that in a later, but the way the volume worked was it did the same thing, except we just sent it to a float parameter of the gain for that particular Metasound. Okay, so let's talk about the UMG widget. So that's how this works. So now track's playing, lead is selected. So now our variable lead is true. Now this is reverb. Okay, so reverb is true, lead is true. So now when I move this knob, it's gonna adjust that submix on the reverb. Listen, here we go. There it is. It was a little laggy. 0 reverb, full reverb, and then some delay. No reverb, full delay. Can mix them together to get that big fat sound. Okay? And that's it. Okay, let's talk about the visualizer real quick. I'm gonna do another video on how to create a visualizer, but this one's pretty simple. It's just a 1-band visualizer. So if you go in lead, you'll see after my mixer, I came out here, I created an envelope follower, and then an output called envelope. So now what that allows us to do is allows me to come into my blueprint, and then let's look at this visualizer. On begin play, we are getting the Metasound output system. So this is the new system that allows you to watch the outputs of a Metasound, which came out, I think, in 5.3, which is really cool. We got the watch output node. So we're using the output subsystem. What are we watching? We're watching the Metasound lead audio component. And then what happens is, as we're watching this, every time it does something, we are generating this custom event that I misspelled. Let me change that, it's gonna bother me. There you go. Envelope synth. And then that is going to come out of here, and we're going to get the float from the output, right? We're watching the output, and we're getting a float. So we're getting this float. Now, this is basically going to give us that envelope response. So we're getting the float. Basically, we're turning that envelope into a number. Then we're going to multiply that by 13 because I wanted it to be super drastic. And then what we're doing is we've created the cylinder, this little blue cylinder right here called cylinder 6, because I had a bunch of them in there. And then what we're doing is we're just going to set the relative 3D scale in the z-axis to follow this float. And what that does is that basically raises the size of that cylinder by how loud that output is on that Metasound. And then I made it like a cool little hologram material. So that's pretty much it. I will do another video on the output follower in the future, but for now we're just gonna keep rolling. All right, so that kind of sums that up. Now what I'm gonna do is, let's just look at the UMG, the widget version of this real quick. So what I did is I created a widget, because let's talk about how we can do this with a widget. And a widget is basically just a 2D animation. When I press M, this widget pops up, and I can mute the lead, and I can also adjust the reverb from here. And then when I mute it, you'll still hear the reverb tail. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Totally dry sound. So the way I did that is I created a widget down here. I called it mute. And so it's real simple. I dragged in a canvas, I dragged in a button and a fader, and 2 labels, mute and verb. And then what I did is I clicked over here on the button, I came down here, and I clicked on click. And what that does is that allows you to send another event dispatcher that I created called mute, and then one that I created float on this fader here. So when I go down here on the fader and then I click on value change, so now when the value of that changes, it's going to send this event dispatcher. It's going to send float based on where that fader is. Then once again, event dispatchers are really the magic in making this happen. So now what I can do is I can go over here and how we're going to call this widget. So, all right, so what we do now is we already have input control here. So when I press M and the game has control of it, actually, you know what? Let's change this to B. We're going to change this to B. Okay, yeah, we're going to call that widget on B. So when I press B, it's going to flip-flop between calling up the widget and removing the widget. So the first time I press B, it's going to create the widget, add it to the viewport, and then it's going to bind the 2 events. These 2 events I created in the widget, the mute and the float parameter. And then what it's going to do, it's also going to flip-flop those. So when I hit mute the first time, it's going to set the float parameter of my Metasound lead, Metasound patch in volume. It's going to set that volume float to 0. Now again, this was this right here. Remember I set up the mixer and I have the input volume. It's going to change this to 0 instantly and then back to 1, and that's how we're going to use that mute button. So the first time I press it, I call up the widget. First time I press mute, it will set the volume to 0. The second time I press mute, because of this flip-flop, it'll set the volume back to 1. So it's basically going from 0 to 1 instantaneously. Now over on the float parameter, anytime I move that knob, it's going to update this value. And here we're setting the submix send, just like we did over here. We're setting the submix send of the lead Metasound on the verb submix. We're changing that level from 0 to 1 in real time based on where that fader is. And then when I press B again, it removes the widget from the screen. So again, press B, there it is. Press B again, and it's gone. So mute, fader's gone, and because I put that analyzer after the output, I'm not getting movement. So it's just visual feedback. Now another cool thing you could do, you could actually tie this float parameter to the material color, so you could change the color as it gets more verby. You could, maybe blue is dry and then yellow is full verb. You could do a blend of the colors, which could be really cool. So anyways, that wraps up this video on Metasounds. I hope this was helpful. Please make sure you like and subscribe and comment in the comment section if you want to create some community there and interact with each other. Look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a great day.